Living authentic relationships, living authentically is what we're going to focus on today. And everything we're teaching in this series that Scott started, Mandy and Clint both shared, and I'll be teaching this week and next week, the goal in all of it is just to improve our relationships, to talk about our marriages, our family relationships, our neighbors, our co-workers. Everything we're teaching applies to just about every relationship in your life, even strangers. And the problem is that we're living in a unique time in our culture, and I think you'll agree with me in this. People are less connected than they've ever been. People are more isolated. I think to a degree, people are a lot more lonely. I think they're afraid, and I think they're unwilling to risk connecting. And this is not who we are as Americans. You know, people that used to come to America always said, the people there are so friendly and outgoing and talk to you, and that just doesn't happen in other parts of the world and so on. And yet we kind of smile at that today as something from some bygone era because we just don't see it happening as much. And it was the church that more than any other institution really connected people and brought people together and put such a high value on those relationships. And it's the church, I believe, that can restore that to society. Amen? I think we're called to that. Now, some people, this is easy, like I'm looking at April. She's going, oh, yeah, absolutely. April never met a stranger. And I love that about you, April. But for some of the rest of us, especially introverts, I think COVID was this thing that said, yeah, it's okay to be inside, and you never have to come back out. The virus came and went, but they just stayed inside. And so I think what's happening, we're finding people are also today very distracted. While they were inside during all that time, they found a whole bunch of things to occupy their time. And so now, on Sundays, people are distracted, bored, tired, or just too overwhelmed to come to church. And this has become more normal. And people just don't realize what they're missing. Now, Paul said to Timothy, his young protege, his young pastor, he said, things are going to get tougher in the last days. Now, we could talk forever about the last days, but you that think it's just started in the last few years, whenever the Bible talks about the last days, it means when the church was launched. So we're in the last days from 2,000 years ago until Jesus returns. That's the last days. I know that doesn't sell as many books and so on if you don't narrow it down to this year, but all that's just sensationalized. It's not true. So someday it is going to be the last day though, right? Jesus is going to come back. But Paul writes this to Timothy in 2 Timothy 3. He says, you should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be difficult times. People will love only themselves and their money. You don't have to have money to love money. You ever notice that? Some of the greediest people I know are poor people because they're desperate. They have their needs. People will only love themselves and their money. They'll be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful. They'll consider nothing sacred. They'll be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They'll be cruel and hate what is good. They'll betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. That statement's always stood out to me. Because in their mind, these people have things in order. Oh, yes, I love God a lot more than anything else. Well, that's not the issue. It's not that you're loving God more or that you love God more than these things. You're loving these things rather than loving God. See? When you track somebody's time and their money and how they invest their lives and where they invest it in their money, you start to see pretty quick what they love and what they pursue. And he says, so they will act religious, but they will reject the power that can make them godly. He says, stay away from people like that. God designed us to grow spiritually and emotionally mature in community. But here's the thing. For me to grow, I've got to be different than I am currently. I've got to change. And who likes change? Nobody. Nobody likes change. But if I don't know where I need to change, I can't grow. And I can't know where I need to change on my own. I need other people. I need God. I cannot figure it out on my own. And so, what does it mean to live healthy lives, authentic lives? No pretense, no masks, nothing fake. The real us, to where we feel enough to be secure with who we are, with ourselves, with others, and with God. And that's what we're going to look at today. So being authentic with ourselves. First of all, we cannot define ourselves. I tried that for years. Every time I defined myself, I kept changing who I was. And ended up, I didn't like that version, so I'd try another version. Or whoever I was around or whatever group I was in, I would adapt. I was like a chameleon. I could adapt, change colors, and look like the people in that group. Anybody else struggle with that? Good, y'all are so holy. Man, I've got so much to learn from you. What I really noticed was how young people, I was youth pastor for years, and I've watched young people fall into this trap. Because when you're little, you believe it when mom and dad says, you're special. You're the cutest little girl in the world. And then you go to school and you find out there's other cute girls. And you're the fastest boy. And you find out you're not the fastest. And you go, my parents lied to me about that. What else did they lie to me about? And you start thinking. And then you start comparing yourself. And pretty soon, it's more important what your peers think about you than what your parents do, because they're biased. But your peers are honest, brutally honest, to point out every flaw and every weakness. Our grandson comes home from school sometimes, and he gets bullied from time to time, and you just want to go beat some kids up, but you can't do that. It's life. You got to get used to the sun. You got to get resilient. You got to be secure in who you are. Or you ever see a young couple, 15, 16 years old, they start dating. And the girl's all excited. She has a boyfriend. She goes to school and she dresses nicer. And she might wear makeup. And the guy, he might take a shower or something, but that's the only difference. Might. But, they're walking hand in hand and they feel good about themselves and everything. What's the flaw in that whole situation? That young girl is now trusting her self-worth and put it in the hands of a teenage boy that's not emotionally secure enough to tie his shoes. In the same way, guy, not so much. He has no clue, but, But then what happens when they break up? The girl's self-worth goes down. The guy, when he's told they've broken up, he might be sad about that. But for the young girl especially, that drive for security is there. And I've watched that. And I've watched it with adults. And I think for all of us, even as adults, none of us are secure enough or capable enough to maintain another adult's self-worth. We have to be able to get this from God. And I preach about this a lot because it's so important to me. Jesus was the most secure person ever. He really was. I was reading this week about the last day of Jesus' life before his crucifixion and then his resurrection. And, here Jesus is brought before the high priest in this mock trial. It's a legal trial. And they start accusing him. And what does Jesus do in his defense? Nothing. He doesn't defend himself because he knows who he is. He knows God's in control. God's going to take care of him. Then he's brought before Pilate. And Pilate says, don't you know I have life and death in my hands? And he goes, you haven't got anything God didn't give you. He's just secure in who he is. Even before that, He's in the upper room with his disciples celebrating the Passover. We call it the Last Supper. And what are the disciples doing? As they're walking in, they're arguing among themselves which of them is the greatest. And here they are in the presence of God, who's about to give his life, and all they can think about is like a Christmas catalog they're going through, what prizes and positions they're going to get in this new kingdom he's going to launch. But how does Jesus respond to them? I know how I would respond. I'd say, stay outside until you get your act together. Then you can come inside and have Passover. But Jesus doesn't. It says in John 13, verse 1, before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come, and he was about to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he loved them to the very end. These are these guys that he knows are going to run away, that are going to deny him, abandon him. These are the ones who are all caught up in their own lives and not even thinking about him in his darkest hour. Even when he goes into Gethsemane to pray, he tells Peter, James, and John, come with me and pray with me. And here he is sweating blood. This is so intense, this emotional battle he's in, and they're sound asleep. And even when Jesus finds them asleep 3 times, he finally says, hey guys, I get it. Your spirit's willing. I know your heart's right, but your flesh is weak. He even makes an excuse for them. That's a selfless individual. Verse 3 of John 13, Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and he would return from God. That was the security that Jesus had. And so what does he do with that security and all that authority? He wraps a towel around his waist, gets down on his knees, takes their dirty feet and washes them. The lowest posture of anybody. Because that's what you can do when you don't need, when your self-worth isn't tied to somebody else. You can really serve them. You can really love them. Like I said, this is so important to me because the first 35 years of my life, I lived with insecurity. I mean, insecurity that ruled my life. Now, let me help you with the math. I was 23 when I went into ministry. And the first 35 years, that means the first 12 years of ministry, I was insecure. Oh, but you're a pastor. People respect you, so that made me feel good. And I was helping people. I mean, people were getting saved and coming to Christ and miracles happening and so on, but I was always serving someone else's ministry. I always needed their approval. And in 1991, April 4th, 1991, God did a work in me of just brokenness. As Jeremy Riddle sings, we're going to sing later, I was sweetly broken, wholly surrendered to God. And it changed everything in my life. That's part of why I wrote this book. Because unless we go through that time of laying down everything, every mask, every facade, I remember during that time not even knowing who I was, but it was going to be fun to discover at the age of 35. I took a sabbatical from church. That led to going into business. The business was successful. From there, I planted a church, then came to Indy, and have planted 2 churches here and helped Brownsburg and now Plainfield. I'm helping another church in southern Indiana, helping another couple that's going to be planting in Nashville, Tennessee coming up. And getting to write and do stuff like this, I don't think any of that would have happened. God couldn't have entrusted any of that stuff to me or people to me in that way if he hadn't have done that work in my life. Now, do I still wrestle with insecurity? Sure. I can find myself intimidated. One person I read that's a writer, he said, yeah, you really haven't written until you get your first 1-star review on Amazon and really get slammed. So that'll probably get tested this week. Hopefully I come through that well. Being able to be secure in who I am has made such a difference in my life. I don't have to think about what I'm going to say to somebody. I want to frame it in love, of course. But when I have to say something difficult, or when I have to challenge someone, I love them, but I'm more concerned that God's truth is spoken than they like me. If somebody has to like me for me to pastor them, then that's not always a good situation. And I've seen people that I've said things to that really offended them. But yet as they sat with it, they realized, that was God. That was right. I need to hear that. So I'm finding that as I'm more authentic with myself and who I am, I can live more authentic with others. And we need one another more than I think we realize or we acknowledge. I read an article this week in the Atlantic magazine. Don't usually read the Atlantic, but I thought this was good. And put this up. It says, why Americans suddenly stopped hanging out. Great article. Right, look at it. And what they did was they pulled up Robert Putnam's book that he wrote back in 1990 called Bowling Alone, in which he talked about how our society was really coming apart and we were less connected than others. He referred to it as America's social metabolism was slowing down. His social metabolism was slowing down. And they write in this book, or in this article in the Atlantic, it says from 2003 to 2022, so they've kind of updated Putnam's book, American men, for example, reduced their average hours of face-to-face socializing by 30%. 30% in just 20 years. For unmarried Americans, the decline was even more at 35%. And for teenagers, it dropped 45%. Boys and girls ages 15 to 19 have reduced their weekly social hangouts by more than 3 hours a week. In short, there is no statistical record of any other period in U.S. history when people have spent more time on their own. We're just not connected, and we're drifting further and further apart. And then this statement really stuck with me. Our lack of social fitness, I like that word, social fitness, may be as dangerous to our health, at least to our mental and emotional health, is our lack of physical fitness. So let me ask you, are you more socially fit than you were 3 years ago? How many would say you are? Good. How many are less socially fit than you were 3 years ago? Good. Good being honest. I think, like I said, especially people that were introverted, I think that was one of the things that happened during COVID, was people just started, isolating, drifting apart. And I think it's because of polarization in our culture. So again, the way to change that is the church. If we're going to be more socially fit or stronger socially or better connected, we're going to have to learn to connect to one another better. And I shared this a couple years ago. I've shared it probably 5 times in our history, but one of the models that I absolutely love was developed by 2 Harvard professors, and it's called the Johari window. And the reason why it's called the Johari window was it was developed by Joseph or Joe Luft and Harrington Ingram. So Joe and Harry, Joe Harry. So pop this up. This is the Johari window. Let me run it through with you real quick, and I'll show you the value of this. So this divides our lives into 4 quadrants. The left top quadrant up here, the open part, that's what I know about me and you know about me. Well, Tony, he's 5'10", and is a pastor of a church and chaplain and married to Lori and so on. Those are the obvious things that most people know. Then there's this closed area that's unknown to others. That's the area that, maybe I'm not going to tell you about. Maybe that's a truth I'm not going to entrust you with or something, We all have areas that are, hidden or closed. Then, this is the really scary one up here. This is what's unknown to self, but known to others. Your blind spot. You ever discover you have a blind spot? And several people knew it, but you didn't? Oh yeah, I've had people do that. Go home and to Lori and go, somebody said I do this. She goes, oh yeah, you do that. I go, really? Yeah, you do it all the time. Why didn't you tell me? She goes, I do, but you don't listen. You know? You laugh like you know that. And then, this is the unknown area down here. That's what you don't know about yourself yet. You just haven't lived long enough, haven't experienced enough life, or maybe just haven't opened up those areas. And it's also unknown to others. It's undeveloped, but it's a whole quadrant of your life. Now, here's the cool thing that happened. If the goal is to see this line here, I want to push it that way. And this line, I want to push down. The goal of pushing them down creates more openness. And in a relationship, how many know an open relationship of communication with your spouse is far better than a closed one? Right? A small group you're in, a life group. The more open everyone is, the more transparent, the more trust that's there, the more blind spots you're going to get over, the more closed areas you're going to get past. So this is how we have to do it. To move from open to blind and from open to close and to push that down, we have to do these two things. We have to ask. The only way I can find out what blind areas are in my life is if I ask you, hey, if you see something in me that's offensive, let me know. Now that's hard to do, isn't it? Because who wants to be target practice, you know? Now, hopefully the person's really kind and loving. Those are only people you should ask, by the way. You know, don't ask if somebody goes, all right, here we go. I'm feeling really bad about myself, so let me dump on you. Find people that are gentle and kind and loving and that will tell you the truth and then help you. So ask. Then, if I want to get closer to you, and encourage you to open your life, then I'm going to have to tell you something about mine. So it might say something like, I've never told anybody this, but I don't trust you guys that much, so no. And this is on video and everything else. No. I don't have an example. If I did, I'd share. But the goal then is to, give me the next one there. The goal is to push into these areas. Here's a wonderful thing. The more open your life becomes, the more secure you are, the more you're willing to take risks and try new things, and the more this unknown becomes reality. This is the exciting part of your life that you haven't even discovered yet. Some of you might say, well, I'm 60 years old. It's time to get on it. Yes, it is. But you can. You can try new things. You can start new hobbies. You can begin helping mentor somebody else. And as you do it, you'll get better and better, and more fruit will be born, and you'll be more fulfilled. This is God's intention. Can you imagine living a completely open life? Can't imagine it completely. There's got to be a little room there, a little room down there. But as you push into this realm, I think, like I said, I think this is where all the excitement happens. If I had to push into this area, I wouldn't have written. Because my attitude was, I'm a reader. I read at least a book a week. So, because of that, there's already good books written on everything. But I felt like God was in this one. And I did it in obedience to Him. And so, who knows what you'll do? Does this make sense? Yes. Good. I encourage you, take a picture of that. And think about it. You know, just consider. Go back to the 2 slides back there. Thank you. These guys are so awesome in the booth. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. You sit up in that booth and nobody acknowledges you till something goes bad. Then they all go. which really makes those guys feel good too. They really like that when you stare at them. So, we have to be willing to do this. We have to have deeper relationships with people. If all your relationships are real shallow, if you don't have people that you trust in your life, then I think what it does is it limits God being able to speak to you, because he speaks to me a lot of times through others. I would never have gone through the brokenness and the healing and what God took me through in 1991 if I didn't have a couple men that I trusted with my life more than myself. When they came to me and said, Tony, you're doing this. And I said, okay, obviously I don't see it or I wouldn't do it. Help me. Oh, they helped me. They gave me example after example after example. And around about the fifth one, I go, okay, I'm catching on. There's a pattern here. This is not just a one-off thing I can dance my way out of. This is real, and I've got to deal with this. And I was broken in that moment because I thought I was serving God and doing my best. I wasn't. You have to have people in your life that you can trust. And to do that, you've got to take a risk. And you risk that they're going to betray you, or that they're going to have a bad day, or they're going to throw it back in your face. But I'm telling you, until you press through, until you do that, you will never be able to really love God at the depth that's possible if you don't love people. That's what 1 John 4:20 says. Look at this. If someone says, I love God, but he hates his fellow believer, that person is a liar. For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? John is just being very, very practical. If we can't love people, it's almost like he says the lid is wherever you love people. That's how you really love God. Because if you can't love them in their weaknesses and in their challenges, then you can't love the God that created them. The problem, if we are becoming a society that's more uncomfortable in talking to people because we're afraid that we'll be misunderstood or we'll say things wrong or something else or we'll offend them, then how are we ever going to talk about something as deep as the gospel? The gospel is not surfacey. The fact that Jesus died for our sins and that we're all sinners and that we deserve judgment, but Jesus took that judgment on himself on the cross. That's the gospel message. He took our sins, so we are no longer guilty. He paid the price. He is a substitute for us. His perfect life in exchange for our sinful life. How are we going to be able to talk at those kind of levels about those kind of issues if we're afraid that if we talk about the weather wrong, somebody's going to get upset? See, this is why we have to trust God in every conversation. God, help me to say these words right. Help me to communicate your heart. When it comes to helping others, I love this statement. I tried to find it on the internet this week and I couldn't, so I'm claiming it. When it comes to helping others, we must become the most willing of students and the kindest of teachers. Willing of students, meaning that we have to ask, and we have to tell, we have to be willing to be accountable, and we have to be more transparent with people. But the kindest of teachers, you know, a really good surgeon who has good equipment will make the minimal incision to treat the thing that's inside of you, to remove that cancer or to fix what's going on in there. I had rotator cuff surgery a couple of years ago, and like 3 little points. And he said, you know, after I came out of surgery, he said it looked like a bomb went off in there. He said there's very little left to attach and did a great job. But, you know, 3 tiny incisions. It used to be that, what do they call it, exploratory surgery? Wasn't that what it was? I'm looking at a couple doctors in here. Exploratory surgery, where they would just kind of open you up and figure out what's going on. Because they didn't have PET scans and MRIs and all that kind of stuff to see what was happening inside of you. So they just have to open you up. Thank God that when you're with somebody who's really mature and who's helping you work on something at the soul level, those emotional issues, they make the minimum incision. They go, hey, I just want to talk to you about one tiny thing. This is one thing I just want to address. These are all the things you're wonderful at. But this one thing is just something I think God wants to help you with. And if they're really good, they'll do it with the smallest of incision. They'll bathe the whole thing, just like before they do an incision, they put that brown stuff all over you. That brown, what's that stuff called? Betadine. Wow. I got nurses, doctors, betadine. Yeah. They put that stuff on you and they clean everything first. And then deal with it. That's the attitude we should take when we're helping somebody. The prevailing value in our society is that everyone does their thing. And the worst social sin is to judge somebody. Only God is my judge. It's real popular. Great for t-shirts. Bad theology to live by. Especially in the family of God. See? Look what Paul says in Galatians 6. He says, brother, if anyone's caught in any trespasses, you who are spiritual, and he's going to tell them what to do, accuse them, gloat over their sin, and gossip to other people in the form of prayer requests about them. Right? Oh no, restore such a one in gentleness, in a spirit of gentleness. Each one looking to yourself so that you will not be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, thereby fulfill the law of Christ. For anyone who thinks he's something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. James said it this way in James 5. My brethren, if any among you strays from the truth and one turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from his error of his ways will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. We're not called to stand on the sideline when someone is struggling, especially if they don't see it. They're put in a body of believers. We are put in relationships so we see it in one another's life and we can help them. And many, many times I've gone to somebody and I usually preface it this way. So if I come to you this way, you know what's going on. You know I love you, right? If I say those words to you, just tighten up. You know it's coming. But I hope that what I communicate after that is how much I love you and how much God loves you. But there's something that's hurting your life and maybe hurting others. And you're not your best. And that's not who you are. And I believe you're greater than that. And God does too. And He wants to help you. See? And I pray that as we frame things that way, then you're able to hear it. Hear it in the way it's given. Not in judgment, but in love. And this leads to the last thing, that's being authentic with God. God wants a relationship with us at the heart level. Jesus said in Matthew 22, for you must, listen how emphatic He is in these statements, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. Both sides, both hemispheres, not just knowledge of God, but relationally and emotionally connected with God. And love your neighbor as yourself. For the entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. I used to really struggle with that. Love your neighbor as yourself. Why? That's not a good standard because I don't even like me. That used to be my perspective, you know. I don't like me. So that's not a very high bar to love somebody else. But here's what I discovered. If I don't like me, and I don't think God did a good job on making me, and I see all the flaws and all the places He could have done better or He messed up without directly accusing Him of that. But when I believe that, how can I tell you that you're made in God's image and that He's crazy about you and He made you just the way you are? See the hypocrisy there? So if I don't love myself, if I don't believe that I am made exactly the way God wants me to make, and I'm growing into His image more and more every day, if I don't believe that about myself, then I cannot communicate that to someone else and be authentic. See? Loving is difficult. And yet we're called to love God that we cannot see and to love people who we can, unfortunately. And we see their flaws and their weaknesses. And yet we're called to love them. Why? Because God calls us to, and the reward in life is wonderful, healthy relationships. I want to close and play a 1-minute clip from a children's book that I absolutely love. How many have read The Velveteen Rabbit? So most of you have. I love this. I want to play a 1-minute clip on what is real. And I like this because Meryl Streep reads it. Watch this.
All about it. What is real? Asked the rabbit one day. Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle? Real isn't how you are made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Sometimes, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily, or who have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand.
A lot of truth there, isn't there? There's a lot of people today that are waiting to become real, that God loves. And the only way he can communicate that love for them and help them become real, become the authentic people he created them to be in relationship with him, is if we love them and we speak the truth to them and we open our lives to them first. This is our challenge. And it's never been more foreign to our culture and more difficult in our society to do. And we have to go against all those trends. We have to be the one that initiates the conversation in public. We have to be the one who talks to the stranger, the one who talks to the person in the store who's waiting on us, and so on. We have to be people that go out of our way so that the church can once again champion these ideas.